Welcome to Modern Farm Business Podcast. This podcast is designed to help the farm leader bring their business to the next level. We'll cover everything from leadership and finance to strategy and planning. I'm your host, Dean Hefta. In Episode 3, The 4 Responsibilities of the Farm Leader, the fourth responsibility we discussed was capital. The responsibility of ensuring capital access so that we can make sure the business is able to run smoothly, that we're able to take advantage of deals that come up, and we're making future-oriented decisions toward our vision. This skill is pronounced as we now face, for the first time in modern history, the fourth year of consecutive negative net returns in agriculture. The capital element of this means having our own cash reserves, which for most businesses that are capital intensive like farming, or if they're in a growth mode, can be very challenging. Maybe it's access to private sources, perhaps a rich uncle or a well-to-do neighbor. But most traditionally, it's bank lending. Today, we're discussing the lender relationship, some of the changing dynamics and tools for building our farm's capital plan. For some insights on this episode, I've talked with Jason Peterson. He's Senior Vice President and Ag Lender with Bell Bank in Fargo, North Dakota. I often hear farmers say, business just doesn't happen on a handshake anymore, or my banker has me jumping through all these crazy hoops. And the truth is, lending, banking, the world of finance has gotten more complicated. Not only thanks to the increased regulations that we face in the industry, but also because we're now in the mode of tighter financial situations and cash flows. So, Jason, could you give us some perspective on what you, as a lender, face on the other side when you're not sitting there with the farmer? What are the things that you're facing that are important for your farmer customers to understand?
Well, as we know, everybody has a boss, right? Everybody has to go through some type of senior credit or, very few of these large dollar transactions are just signed off by one person. So as I might like a credit or I like working with a customer, I still have, one or three credit types that I have to go through committee, and I have to defend and answer those tough questions. And especially if we're going in and we see that, okay, liquidity is down, working capital has eroded or is negative, can we go in and do some type of fix on it? Can we do something against real estate and amortize some things out? But the key question there is always, but is there a plan? We don't want to just fix it once and then have the same issue come up year 2, year 3, and just erode all of that equity that they've built up. So it's just imperative that you got to have some type of plan that the farmer has put together and is willing and able to incorporate, and that's something that's going to be acceptable to the bank as well. I think that's the biggest thing that I see sitting on the desk is that I've got a senior credit committee or a senior credit person that I have to essentially get that person comfortable with these credits as much as I like them.
So when we're building our approach for strengthening our capital plan, we have to understand the dynamics that our lender is dealing with after we leave the meeting. If we want to position ourselves as what I'll call a risk of choice, we must formulate our approach by making it easy to do business with us. To know how to be easy to do business with, we need to understand what's going on in their world so we can align our approach. To evaluate our lender plan, let's use a couple of lenses. First, I'm going to call it the needs and expectations. That's our first lens. The second is my plan. Under needs and expectations, there's two components. First, it is the lender. The second is me. Needs and expectations are important to establish in any relationship. And I'm applying it here because it's so easy to overlook this. We make lots of assumptions in relationships, and many of those are around what others might expect of us. And disappointment really begins when we don't fulfill expectations, even if they haven't been stated. So to understand the lender's needs and expectations, we need to ask. Having a conversation about what are the key things you really need from me? What do you need from me so you can be successful? I also need to find out their expectations. Needs and expectations are different. The need is the specific thing that I have to deliver to them so they can do their job. It might be providing the balance sheet information by a certain date. Expectations are more qualitative, and they could be different between lenders. So the lender says to me, well, I expect to be updated every couple of months on what's new, how things are going, etc. I don't want to always be the one that's initiating the conversation. These are important to understand early because you may need to negotiate those expectations that they have. So you have to first be clear about them. You need to clarify them. And then they need to cascade into that second lens we'll talk about later, your plan. You also need to clarify what your needs are and what your expectations are of the lender. There should be respect for each other, and you should be able to advocate for the things that you need in that business relationship. And these things could be different for each farm. It might mean that you have to reiterate with everybody you do business how important confidentiality is for you. And these things should be assumed that people aren't talking about your business, but that's very important for you. It might be ensuring that if you raise an issue early with the lender that maybe you're experiencing on the farm, that you're not going to be punished by being the first to communicate what's going on. You want to understand, how are they going to take bad news? How are they going to respond to that? And do people end up at their bank getting rewarded for not communicating, even though they say we want good communication? So that lens, needs and expectations, is both for the lender and for you. And I'd like to get Jason's input again. Jason Peterson, again from Bell Bank. Jason, what are some of the expectations that you lay out to your customers?
One thing that I like to flip that, I'm going to lay out what my expectations are secondly, but I want them to think a little bit about, well, what is your expectation from a bank? You know, do you have an expectation that somebody's going to be out there every month on a visit? Do you want a weekly call? Do you like emails? Do you like texts? And I like to get those folks thinking a little bit about, well, yeah, what do I want from a bank relationship? Do I need a little bit more attention when, you know, times are a little more difficult versus when, you know, they're easier and prices are better, et cetera? Do I need all that attention? And I think we've had even better communication as we go forward. With the Midwest NICE, I guess, we've had to train ourselves to ask some of these harder questions too. And I think it just is imperative that you lay that out right away. I had a customer tell me that, you know, he's real blunt when he asks questions, you know, and I chuckled and I just stated, well, I'm pretty blunt when I answer them too, but that's because these are hard questions with not easy answers. So we need to have that real open communication and be able to bounce things off of each other. And I really need to be able to communicate to you too how you can play well with the bank, because end of the day, we're going to have policy, we're going to have different things like that clients are going to have to adhere to stay in good standing with the bank. So I need to be very proactive and lay that out. This is our working capital bogey that we have to hit. We need to stay there. And if we're not there, we need to have a plan. You know, if you're going to have capital expenditure, you got to let us know. You got to let us know what's happening, the whys, where you're financing it at. We don't want any surprises at year end. I mean, that's probably the worst thing that we can do is come in, get somebody renewed, you know, first quarter, February, March, and then barely talk to them or, you know, how are things going? Great, that kind of conversation. We need to have the conversations throughout the year. How are we doing on budget? How are we doing on the capital expenditures? How are repairs, maintenance? How are things looking? You know, so that when we get to harvest and thereafter, we're nobody is surprised. We need to have those conversations the entire growing season.
Now, let's talk about that second lens, your plan. Your plan is the simple elements that you lay out in order to fulfill the expectations and focus on the needs of your operation. Your plan has three elements: the business plan, the communication plan, and the backup plan. First is the business plan. Let's hear from Jason again on his thoughts on the plans that he expects from clients regarding their business.
You know, something that's going to be a living and breathing document that's going to change, and also some different scenario plans. I like guys that like to put some numbers together and revisit those throughout the year and say, okay, we thought we'd be here, but we're actually here. And sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, in some type of format that's readable. If a guy comes in or a gal or whoever comes in and it's just, well, we jotted some numbers down and this is kind of what we think it's going to be, and they've literally just jotted them down, these are multi-million-dollar businesses, and they need to be treated as such with the numbers. The folks that know their numbers and that can present their numbers, that makes life a lot easier for everybody involved. If you've got an accountant, that's great and fantastic, but you need to understand those numbers as well. If your lender asks you, what does this number mean and what is this indicative of, and you state, I don't know, you'll have to ask my accountant, that's not a great answer, because you need to know it. You need to fully understand what's making those numbers tick.
So to reiterate, more than anything, know your numbers, know your business. That's the language of business and the language of the lender. It's the best way to give them more confidence in you is by knowing your business well. Next is the element of the plan regarding communication. What's really easy to say is, oh yeah, I'm going to give an update after spring, and then I'm going to give another update later in the summer and harvest, yada, yada, yada. What the communication plan does is it helps us to make the decisions early of what we're going to do and when, so we can execute more easily later. We simply determine a handful of critical what, hows, and whens. What are the things I need to communicate? How do I need to do it? Is it a phone call or email? And when does this need to happen? And I need to get it on my calendar so that I can be reminded, and I don't have to continually be thinking about this, but it's on my calendar. The third element is the backup plan, and that's ensuring that you have more than one relationship in the banking world. This isn't to try to be tricky or conniving or anything. It's about ensuring the continuity of your business. You don't know when your lender leaves their bank or has a health issue, or when the bank sells to another or maybe gets out of ag lending. You don't know those things. They're outside of your control. Any number of things like that could happen. What you want to be assured of is that you have someone warming up in the bullpen. People that you're fostering a relationship with, that you can be transparent with, and they understand your business and what you have going on and how they might someday fit into that. It might mean you're keeping them up to date on your financials. It might mean you have some small loans there. There's something that you're fostering that relationship with, and maybe you're touching base on a lunch every year, but you're building a relationship and you're understanding what they have going on and what their vision of working with their clients means. And so this isn't about trying to leverage our bank relationship, but it is about making sure that we have transparency and the confidence to know we're not being held hostage. And that if something happens where the banker I'm working with isn't holding up their end of the bargain, I feel like I have some choices. Okay, review time. In your lending relationships, think about two things: the needs and expectations and your plan. So first, get clear on what you need and expect from the lender, and be sure to fully understand what they need and expect from you. This allows us to avoid frustration later in the relationship, and if there's a gap between what I'm expecting and what they're expecting, you can work it out early and get on the same page. Next, lay out your plan so you can fulfill on the needs and expectations and commitments you've made. Have a basic business plan with numbers, a communication plan so you can touch on the what and the how and the when, and finally, develop that backup plan, the backup relationship, so you don't feel that you're stuck if something outside of your control happens. I want to thank Jason Peterson again for his perspective on this topic and for joining me on this episode of Modern Farm Business. Be sure to tell your friends about this podcast and send me an email at dean@modernfarmbusiness.com on any topics that you'd like to explore further or thoughts for upcoming episodes. Next week, you'll want to join us again as I talk with Daniel Burris. He's one of the leading business futurists, and he has a new book coming out. It's a fascinating conversation, and I look forward to you joining us. Thanks again, and have a great week.